Hello everyone, hope you all are doing great and welcome to this new course on Photos app where we are going to be creating this Photos app using API provided by Pixels. So pixels.com is a website that gives you access to free photos using an API. Well, they also have free videos as well. And basically, in this website, um, your photographers go and upload their creation, and they actually provide you an API that you can use to download that data or display that data in your app or whatever you want to do with it. Okay, and they're free to use. So you can basically check out pixels.com right here at pixels.com, and you can see there are like a whole bunch of photos, and as you can see, like there are videos and everything as well. They have a very well written API, and this API once again gives us access to all the data that there is. Okay, so the good thing about Pixel is it gives you enough amount of data that actually works good for mobile use cases because it has a source for the API that actually gives you various range and size of images according to the need that you may have, right? So that's about the API itself that we're going to be using to develop this app. Let's take a look at the app itself. So basically, we're going to be developing this app using storyboard, and storyboard by storyboard, I mean the not Swift UI. It's the storyboard when you're like creating your project, you choose Swift UI for the user interface or storyboard. So you're going to be choosing storyboard in that case. So we can use UI kit. Okay, and the code itself is going to be a complete programmatic layout. So there's not going to be any zip file or nib file or storyboards that are being used inside this project. It's going to be completely programmatic, and so you're going to be learning about that. All right, so let's take a look at the app itself, and then we're going to talk about learning objectives from this course. Okay, so this is the app. We are going to display images downloaded from Pixels API on the on our app in a table view. Okay, we're going to display who the photographer is and their tag or handle. Okay, and when you tap on the photo itself, you can see a excuse me, a portrait view of their photo, and we're going to be displaying a landscape image or landscape photo. So that's where this API is going to be, it's going to come handy. You have portrait and landscape, both of them available as a source for the URL. So API itself gives you access to those two. Okay, so we're going to be using that. Next thing you're gonna notice basically we're gonna develop is gonna be infinite loading. So if we keep scrolling, the new images are gonna load at the bottom, and our users can keep scrolling to explore more images. All right, so this on itself is a rather complex app, and basically there are some learning objectives. First of all, the entire app is written programmatically, so there is no use of UI or drag and drop based UI construction. So there's no storyboard, zip, or nib. So you actually get to learn how to create programmatic layout in Swift. We are also going to be creating abstract networking layer, which basically gives you access to generic based networking layer that you can create a generic solution that can be basically used in any of your apps. So you can literally take those files and drop it into another project and start using those, and it'll simplify your networking layer, and it's efficiently managed, decodable, and everything is generic based, so you wouldn't have to code over and over your API client. Okay, so how we're gonna see how we're gonna basically develop that, and we're going to use endpoint management using enum. So we're going to be using enum not for just for switch case and stuff. We're going to be using for endpoint management, and we're going to take protocol oriented approach to basically create protocols and we're going to see how we can extend those protocols not only within structs but within enums as well. Okay, we're going to be using Swift generics, so we're going to learn about Swift generics. So that's going to be your entire networking part, API part. Then you're also going to be learning MVVM design pattern. So basically how model view model design pattern works and how you can actually leverage MVVM design pattern to create lean view controllers. Okay, so your view controllers have limited or uh, just the right amount of control. So they are not doing too much on behalf of your view or on behalf of your model. So we're gonna see how we can keep our view controllers like lean, so they only perform enough tasks, which is the communication between model and the view. All right, so that's going to be another learning objective for this course. There are a few more. One of the most important thing dealing with table views and working with images is efficiently loading images on table view. And I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to understand how to load images in table view, because if you have worked with images in table view cell, you know how hard it is to basically display an image inside a cell. And whenever that cell reuse happens, that flickering or loading of wrong images and stuff like that, that all happens within table view, and it's quite a challenge. So we're going to be learning how to develop an efficient way of loading images in table view. We're going to be loading all the images from network. So you're going to learn how to load network images. You're going to learn how to asynchronously load images and cache them. Okay, you're gonna learn how to handle downloads, image downloads, and cancellations if the row is no longer visible, so you can prepare the cell for reuse within table view. Okay, you're going to be learning how you can leverage the infinite loading of the cell. So whenever user scrolls at certain point, you can load more content at the bottom, so your user never runs out of content, right? So that's going to be another thing that you're going to be learning. We're going to be using delegate pattern as well in this course to propagate events, and we're going to be separating out the view from view controller. That way we can manage views state separately and view controller state separately. Okay, so there's a lot in this course that's jam-packed, and we are going to be creating a production quality app. So basically you're going to be learning how to create a production ready app, and these concepts that you're going to learn, you can apply these concepts in your next project, and you sure will see that a lot of benefit and reuse comes with those things. All right, so I hope you're excited to join me in this course and learn more about how to better architect your apps. Okay, so I will see you guys in the next video, and we're gonna get started. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hello and welcome back, and in this video we're gonna start our project. So what I've done is I've created an empty project, and while creating the project, so let me show you. If you go file new project, and you choose app, when you click next, all right, when you click next, this is where you're gonna enter your product name, your team ID, your organization name, um, and then here, this is the place I was talking about. So interface, UI kit based interface. Apple still calls it storyboard. Um, so mind it, like we're not gonna be coding anything in story in storyboard files, but still called storyboard. Okay, so we're gonna be choosing storyboard. Okay, and not Swift UI, and the lifecycle is gonna be UI kit app delegate lifecycle. So when you're creating the project, make sure you select this one. Okay, so once you have created the project is going to show up with this standard template. So your Xcode is going to create this for you. So next thing what you can do is basically um, go into the main storyboard. So select this file and simply delete it. Okay, because we're going to be launching this view controller programmatically. All right, so that was first thing. Second thing you need to excuse me. Second thing you need to do is go to info.plist, and in the info.plist you will see application scene manifest. Okay, so expand that, and once you expand that, you're gonna see scene configuration. Expand that too. Okay, application session role. Expand that. You'll see item 0 in there, and as soon as you expand that one, you will see storyboard name. So we need to remove this from here as well. Okay, and save. So our, so basically this ensures that our app is not gonna try to load main.storyboard, but it'll try our programmatic way. Okay, now last thing you need to do is go to your project settings, general, main interface. Just select main and remove and hit enter. Okay, save that, and that's about it. Now how would we go ahead and launch the view controller that we want to have as an entry point? So I'll show you right here, but we're going to delete the default view controller and we're going to create a new view controller, home view controller, so we know which view controller we want to launch. Okay, so first thing what you need to do next is basically go to your scene delegate. Now your scenes are, your app is managed using scenes, so it's composed of scenes. On the iOS side there's only one scene that you see, but if you use iPad or macOS, then scenes can be replicated, so you can have multiple scenes for an app. Okay, so you're gonna go to this section, scene will connect to session. Okay, here you'll see this guard let underscore scene window scene. So for this underscore we're simply gonna say this is called window scene. All right, and then we're gonna create view controller variable, and we're gonna assign view controller into this. So we're going to initialize a view controller, and this view controller is this view controller class right here. Okay, so we're going to initialize this view controller and assign an object. So we're going to create view controllers object. Okay, once we have created this object, we're going to use window. Okay, and we're going to create our window. So we're going to say UI window from scene. So window scene, and we're gonna say window dot root view controller is equal to view controller. Okay, now this last step is most important to make this window as key window and make it visible. Okay, so in order to see if we have everything working properly or not, we're gonna change the background color for our view to red. Right, and let's go ahead and launch this inside our simulator and see if we can see a red view controller. So it may take for the initial launch, it may take a bit, and there you go, you have your red view controller launching. That means our programmatic initialization is successful. Okay, so that is done. So let's go ahead and remove that color, red color. And as soon as you create your view controller, you're going to notice that your view controller is created with background color as black. Okay, so we can simply set the background color to white. All right, okay, so we are all right, we are done with this one. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to create a few folders. So let's go ahead and start creating some folders. So we're going to need folder for view controllers. So view controllers. Okay. We're going to need, so just select, right click and select new group. We're going to need a folder for views. Okay. Going to need folder for models. And gonna need for view models and one for networking. All right. Okay, so we're gonna remove this. So delete. Okay, we're gonna create a new folder. So now for these files, these are support files. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select these and set them in a new group without folder. So this is going to be the virtual folder. So I'm going to call this support files. Okay, so that didn't take any effect. So I'm going to manually move these. Okay, all right. So at the end, this is what you should see. If you try to build your app, you're going to see build fails because we have that scene delegate which has this view controller missing, so we're going to fix that now. So let's go ahead and right click on your view controller, add a new file, and you're going to add a new Swift file. You can add a Swift file or you can add a CocoaTouch class, and CocoaTouch class takes a base view controller, a base class that you can actually create your object from. So let's create CocoaTouch in this case, and I'll show you the other case in next class creation. So we're gonna call this home view controller, and we're gonna simply save this. So we're gonna create. Okay, so our file is created. Okay. Now, if you notice, there are a few things that viewController needs. So viewController inherits from base class UI viewController, and it has view.did_load. Okay, so next time when you're creating a file, you can simply choose a Swift file and write this out yourself. All right, so go to your scene delegate and change this to home view controller, like so, and come back here and set view dot background color is equal to white. Okay, go ahead and build it again, and you should be able to launch the app successfully. Okay, all right, so now we are able to launch this this app programmatically, so that's good. Next thing we're going to work on is going to be the models layer. So we're going to create models for our photo feed, and for that we're going to check out the API. All right, so what we're going to do in this section is basically we are going to sign up for Pixels. So I've already signed up, so you simply go to pixels.com, so pexels.com, and go ahead and click join to basically join. It's a free registration. All you need is your email address, and then you'll be able to create your account. And once you have your account created, there's going to be a confirmation email. As soon as you confirm your email, you'll get an API key. Okay, so once you get the API key, you will go to documentation section. It will show you, like, once you get the API key, that documentation is listed there. Okay, so once you have the documentation listed, you will land on this screen when you click on that link. Okay, and this link has, like, a whole bunch of things. There is an authorization, so I'll talk to you about authorization in a in the video itself, how to do that. But authorization, essentially, the way it the way it goes. So let me show you. Okay, so authorization is an authorization object. By the way, this is my key, so please don't use it. Please register because it's absolutely free. And go ahead and sign up and get yourself an API key. Okay. Um, but once you have registered and got the authorization, the way this API's authorization work is you need to set an authorization header, okay, and provide the authorization key inside that header. And after that, if you make a call to the API, you'll be able to request stuff from the API. So you'll be able to start getting response. You're not gonna get 401 or unauthorized error. Okay, so make sure to get your API key. Right, then we're gonna look at photos object. So there is gonna be the photo object that actually tells you about the photo itself. What are the things that this API provides, right? There's only going to be a few things that we're going to be interested in. For example, we are going to be interested in ID. We are not going to be interested in width or height, at least in this case. I will not be, but if you are interested, please feel free to do that. There is a URL, so in case if you want to provide a URL back to pixels, then you can use this URL. Okay, so you can have a functionality where user taps on the photo and they can check out this photo in a web browser or something. You can have that too. Okay, so that's why URL is there. Then you have the photographer who took this photo and the photographer's URL. So photographer itself, their profile. So you can have that too um, in your app. Okay, so for our case, we're gonna be needing ID, photographer, just for the name, and then we're gonna need the URL, but we're gonna only extract the part of after at. So this entire section we're gonna take it out and create a at symbol like or tag for them. So we're gonna call this photographer tag. Okay, so we're gonna see how we can do that, and then we might need basically yeah, we're gonna definitely need photo size. So basically size is the source, and this is another object that has portrait and landscape values. So we're gonna create another class which is gonna contain these two, so we can actually create this whole thing codable. Okay, if you notice this all response, all this comes in basically um, with a feed result. Okay, so let me see. Okay, so let's look at the curated part. So we're gonna be so I'm gonna show you how you can use enum to provide different values. So if you want to search for photos, you can have this section. If you want curated photos, you can have this section. We will work on curated photos in this example, and there's going to be a challenge. So for you, basically you're going to be working on a part where you're going to provide search for photos, another view controller that can be launched and user can search for photos. Okay, so we're going to be providing both endpoints. Now if you look at curated photos and basically yeah, curated photos or search for photos, both of them have similar JSON response if you look at this. So let's look at curated photos, then I'll show you how search for photos look like. So you have page, you have per page, so how many, so page number, right? Per page is how many results you want to see on the page. And then you have photos, and the photos is an array which actually lists out in individual photo object that you just saw. Okay, the photo object, this one. So in our API response, we need to code our model in such a way where it can take all these values, right? For search for photos, the only additional thing is total result. Total result actually gives you how many results are there, and then we have page per page, and once again photos. So this tells me that there's only going to be one photo feed result for both of the APIs. So we're going to create one of that. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into Xcode, and we can create this API. So I'm going to set this documentation aside, and all right, so now we're going to create our models. So right click on your models folder and create a photo feed result. So a search file, call this photo feed result. Okay, and foundation is okay. Import foundation. I'm gonna create a struct photo feed result. This is gonna be codable, and we're gonna have those tags or those fields that we saw in our documentation. So once again, pulling up the documentation, these fields, we're gonna type them as is. Okay, so we're gonna type them as is. That's gonna give us ability, or give codable ability to decode those. All right. Okay, so total results and page. Right. So we are creating this object called photo, right? It doesn't exist right now. So let's go ahead and create a new file. So I'm going to press Command N to create a new file, and I'm going to call this photo. Okay, and this is going to be our photo object. And here we're going to create a struct again called photo codable. Okay, now if you build, once you have the photo created, your build is going to succeed, and this complaint is gone that this object doesn't exist, because now it does. All right, so back to photo, we're going to create ID. Photographer. We're going to create a computed property out of photographer's URL, and we're going to basically simply return photographer URL dot replacing occurrences of. So we're going to replace occurrences of string with something. So let me paste the code, and then we're going to talk about it. So go back to the documentation, and I'll show you. All right, so when you get your response, right, your photo object, when you get your photo object, there you go. Okay, your photographer URL has @ at the end, right? So we need to take this entire string and replace it with space, or empty, basically no space. What this is going to do is gonna basically just get this part of the photographer's name. Okay, so if you are extending this app to basically provide photographer's profile, then what you can do is you can create this, you can keep this as a base URL, and then append the tag to basically generate the URL for the photographer. Okay, that's how you can do it. All right, so remaining everything else is yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go into detail of that. So let's go ahead and set aside the documentation once again and go back. Okay, what we're gonna need is basically the source, which has the photos, size of the photo. So I'm gonna call this photo size. Okay, and this object is not created, so let's go ahead and create that as well. Okay, so photo size is gonna have landscape and portrait. Landscape is the one that we're gonna use to display in the table view cell. So we're gonna display a photo in landscape in table view cell, and when user taps on a photo, then we're gonna launch its portrait version. Okay, so that is something that we're going to do. Go ahead and build, and you should be able to build now. Okay, so now our models are ready actually. So we have photos, we have photo feed that actually gives us the entire response. We have photo, and we have photo size. Um, so all of these are models related to the response itself. Now, how about the response itself, like the response that we're gonna get? How we gonna handle? How we gonna handle the base URL? How we gonna handle the URL construction and stuff like that? So that is going to be next. We're going to create one more model, but that model is going to be related to networking code. So let's go ahead and look at the networking part, and then we're going to create some protocols, and we're going to create one additional protocol to handle the endpoint management using enum. Okay, all right, so in this section we're going to see how to manage our networking part. So right click on your networking, and basically launch your new file template wizard, and we're gonna select Swift file one more time, hit enter, and we're gonna name this file endpoint. So this endpoint is going to be a protocol that is going to provide base URL path for the API and any query that you might have. It'll also have an API key. This is where we're gonna add the auth header, create URL basically for the API, and create a request. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that. So we're gonna first create a protocol. We're gonna call this endpoint, and this protocol endpoint is gonna have a base gettable property path query. Okay, now we're gonna extend this protocol with extension, and extension is a way to add more functionality into your protocol or provide default implementation. We're gonna add a bit more functionality into this, so we're gonna create an auth header. Now if you know about protocol, you know that protocols don't allow any kind of definitions within them, right? Protocol body itself. But if you need to have a definition or default implementation, you should always include it in your extension, and you can only include it in your extension at this point. So Swift restricts you to provide any kind of definition within the protocol definite protocol declaration itself, but you can use the extension to provide default implementation for those. These implementations are still overridable, um, but they give you a default way where your user does not have to implement them if they don't need to. Okay, with that, first property that we're gonna need is gonna be auth header. Okay, so auth header is basically the API key, the API key that is given to us by Pixels API. So we're gonna need that. So I'm gonna create a new file here called API, and this file is going to have the API key. Okay, and you're gonna have static lat key, and your API key is gonna go there. Now I'm gonna put my API key and gonna jump back into the endpoint. So you go ahead and grab your API key, populate it in there, and I'll see you in endpoint class, endpoint struct once again. Okay. All right. So hopefully you were able to find the API key and you were able to put it. So when we have put the API key, we can simply return for the auth header the API dot key like that. Okay. Now here we are also going to create a URL components. URL components. Okay, and this is basically going to help us construct the URL. All right, for the base URL, we are simply going to say take the base that has been declared inside the endpoint. If nothing is provided, just create empty URL component, and then you're going to say component dot path is equal to path, and components dot query is equal to query, and then return the component itself. Okay. Next, we're going to create a request. For URL components, we can construct URL from URL components. If URL is not there, I'm just going to type some dummy URL. So you can put your fallback URL here. And I say for the request, I'm going to create URL request object passing URL, and for the request we are going to set we're going to force unwrap this one because this one is going to generate optional. So we know that we are passing this string, so we can actually force unwrap that one. And I'm just gonna say result dot set value, and this is where we're gonna set the auth header. So we're gonna say auth header for field authorization. So it's gonna be the authorization field request header, and we're gonna return this request. Okay. All right. So this is our endpoint. Now, like I mentioned in the last section, that we're gonna need one more model, and this model is going to be an enum. This model is going to provide us a way to basically choose between search by category API or curated, and it's also going to provide endpoint, the base URL, the path, and the query. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new file in the model. I'm going to call this one photo feed. Okay, and we're going to create an enum here, and we're going to use enum to basically provide us this functionality of choosing between two categories. So there's going to be a case search by category, okay. This is going to take two associated values. There's going to be category of type string and per page int. So basically when you're building this search by category functionality, in that case, you're going to provide a category and you're going to provide how many items per page you want. Okay. Uh, for the second case, it's going to be curated, and this is going to take current page int per page int. Okay. So these two associated values it's gonna provide. Now we're gonna create an extension on photo feed itself, and this is going to extend that protocol. Now protocols can be extended by, or protocols definition can be provided by enums as well. Okay, so now your compiler is going to say type photo feed does not conform to protocol endpoint, and we do want it to conform to protocol, so we're going to simply say, okay, fill in the blanks for me, and there you go, you have your base URL string created. So we're going to simply return our base URL for pixels. So base URL for pixels is api.pixels.com, so I'm going to paste it right here. For the path, we're going to put a switch statement here, and this switch is going to be on self. Okay, and there are going to be two patterns to follow. There's going to be one which is search by category, so I don't need any of these for this case. So I'm simply going to return, because I'm only creating the endpoint, and I'll leave. So right now it's only path, so you don't need the other associated value parameters, by the way. You're gonna need those in the query part. Okay, and curated. Once again, take these things out and return. Curated. Okay. Now the query part. This is where the query comes in. So if you go back into the documentation for the curated, you're gonna notice that the query is right here. So this is the query. It takes http api.pixels.com/v1 curated per page, right, is equal to 1. So one record per page. Now you can change that. You can also pass so the request. Okay, so you can pass for the parameter, you can pass per page. So default is 15. If you don't pass it, we're gonna pass it, and the page number, the number of page you are requesting. So we're gonna basically use this to increment, like, to get like second page, third page, and stuff like that. So we're gonna pass this one as well. All right, so go back to our Xcode, and for the query, we're gonna once again put a switch statement on self. Search by category. Now here we are interested in associated values, so I'm going to type for search by category. So category that you're going to select, and per page. Okay, and this is going to return a query is equal to category and per page is equal to per page. Okay, so this is what it was going to return for search by category. For curated, it's going to once again take, so let me Control Z, and we're going to remove these and simply say let current page let per page, and return. So I'm going to paste in this code. Return page is equal to current page, and per page is equal to per page. Okay, so that is our query, which is going to be So when we request this enum dot query, it's gonna for a curated case, it's gonna give us the query API dot with base and path and everything, like with the page numbers that we are requesting. Okay, so that is the next part, where we're gonna actually talk about how are we gonna get the endpoint working so it can provide us the entire URL. And you're gonna see basically, well, uh, uh, I mean, fetching the response. If you look at your endpoint right here in your URL component, you're already using these components. So you're going to say base, path, and query. So sorry, I take the back, take it back. You already, so this endpoint right here is what we're going to use to call, and photo feed is going to provide us all this information. So whenever we're going to say photo feed dot request and stuff like that, it's going to construct that by getting those properties that you have created right here, for the base, for the path, and for the query, because that URL is being constructed right here. The request is being constructed right here. So in order to construct this request, you can have a URL component. Your URL component already requests the base, which is for your photo feed case, it's going to provide the pixels. For the path, it's going to provide, we're going to be interested in curated, but whichever path you have passed, it's going to provide that. Query, whichever query path you have provided or query you have provided, curated or search by category, it's going to provide that. So you're going to get all that information right there. Okay. All right. So this is setting up our endpoint. All right. So let's go ahead and look into our other networking related components. All right, so in this section, we're going to create our generic networking layer that we were talking about. And next few files that we're going to create, these files, you can literally take them and drop it into your another project and see and basically work with networking. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. So I'm going to create, under networking section, I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to call this one result. All right. So this result is going to be an enum called result, and this result is going to have two generic types, t and u, and we're going to say where u is error. So we're going to give the type for u, that's error. Then we're going to say in case of success, we're going to pass t, and in case of failure, we're going to pass u. Okay, it's your generic result object that we have created here. All right, now we're gonna use this inside our other classes that we're gonna, other structs that we're gonna create. Okay, so let's create a new file, and we're gonna call this one API error. So basically these are the errors, error cases that you may encounter, like, or your API may encounter during these networking sessions. So we want to create an enum for that to capture them properly. So API error, and we can have request failed, first one, invalid data, response unsuccessful, these are the error cases, the API error cases that we're going to track, and we're going to create a localized description property that is going to provide a localized description, a string-based description for these errors. So we're going to simply return what this error is. So in our case, we're simply going to say just what the error reads. Okay, so this localized description is providing a localized description for all the error cases uh, that will be generated. Okay, we're going to create another class or another struct, and this one is going to be API client. Now API client is going to be a protocol. We're going to create a new file where we're going to provide the API client protocol. Okay, so let's go ahead and create API client, right? And this protocol is going to be a generic type. So protocol API client. Okay, it's going to have session, which is going to be URL session gettable property, and it's going to have a function called fetch. Okay, and this is going to be taking a type decodable, so it's going to be a generic type decodable. Any decodable type will do. We're gonna expect request parameter to be passed in, so URL request. We're gonna have a closure basically for decoding itself, so we're gonna say this is gonna give us a decodable object, and then we're gonna have a completion, and this completion is going to give us the result. All right. So this is your API client protocol. Now let's go ahead and check it out. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, if we build, everything should succeed. Okay, now we're going to provide an extension for API client, and we're going to create, first we're going to create a type alias for our task completion handler. So this is going to be decodable and API error. Just going to return void. All right, now we're going to create a private function decoding task, which is going to take generic type D of type decodable with request URL request decoding type t.type. Now this t.type is the decoding type, because your decodable object takes the type itself, right? So with t.type, we're gonna get the class or the struct, the decodable type name itself. Okay, all right, with the completion, escaping JSON task completion handler. Okay, this is going to return URL session task to us. Okay, now we're going to create a task session dot data task. All right, and we're going to generate a data task from with request. So request that have been passed in to us right here. Okay, and we will use the completion that gives us access to data response and error. Okay, now we're gonna check. First thing is if we can cast the response into HTTP URL response or not. So HTTP response, and here if we can't, then we're gonna pass the completion back with nil request failed, and we can return from here. Now if the HTTP response status code is 200, everything is okay, then we're gonna try to get data, and we're gonna wrap this data into dolet. So generic model that we're gonna get from JSON decoding. So we can say JSON decode.decode, and here we're gonna say decoding type. Remember, decoding type is the type that's been provided to us. With the T, we're gonna, whatever T is, we're gonna get its type with the decoding type. Okay, and this is gonna be from data. Okay, for the completion, we're gonna pass generic model back. I'm gonna catch if there's anything, and I'm gonna pass completion with nil and say JSON conversion failed. Okay, for the else case, oops, we should provide put equal sign. Okay, for the else case, gonna simply provide a completion with invalid data, right? And for the last else case where HTTP response is not 200, we're gonna provide a completion with nil response unsuccessful. Okay, at the end we're gonna return task. Okay, so this is a private function that's gonna be used inside our fetch function. So let's provide a default definition for fetch itself. Right, so I'm going to take this method signature right here instead of typing the whole thing. There we go. And remember, we talked about, like, how protocols can have default definition. This is what we are providing. We're saying, like, fetch has API client has this fetch function which has a default implementation, which is right here. Now once again, we are going to create our task from decoding task, so helper function, and in that helper function we're going to pass our request and the type to yourself. Okay, and this is going to give us the JSON decoded or error, right? So we're going to simply say dispatch queue dot main dot async. Okay, and JSON, so let's get the JSON first. if there's any issue. If there's error and we got the error, then we can simply return that in the completion. Otherwise, we are going to return, well, if error object is not nil, then we can return the error object itself. Otherwise, we're gonna return result.failure invalid data, because we could not get the data, right? And we're gonna have a return right here. Okay. Now we're gonna say if let value, that means can we decode the JSON that we got, right? Can we, if we can decode that, then we're gonna provide that in the completion inside success. Otherwise, we're gonna simply call completion failure JSON parsing failed. Okay, and once again, right here, we're gonna say task dot resume. So this time we're gonna resume our session task. Okay. So what once again this is gonna do is basically we are going to get a decodable object. So this decoding task helper is gonna help us basically first of all make the request. So we are making the URL request here that we are calling the API, right? We are getting the response, and we are basically finding if the response is okay. If the response is okay, then we're gonna create a generic model out of that. Okay, and that model is gonna basically decode the type for us according to the type defined. Okay, and that decoding task is basically called inside our fetch function. So we have just broken down this URL session task into two different functions, right? So this is gonna basically call the decoding task, and the decoding, if you notice, um, the decoding type is a completion right here. This guy right here, it actually gives you access to the JSON. If the value is there, it gets that from the closure block, and it assigns that value, so we can actually pass that inside the completion. So what you're gonna get is the model itself for your API call, right? So you're gonna make the API call and you're gonna get your model populated. Okay, now these three files, result, API error, and API client, are generic. So basically you can take them and drop it into another project and start using as your networking layer. Now, how can you use this? That's the topic for the next section. All right, so let's talk about how to use this API client. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to create a new file, and we're going to call this file pixels client. And once again, import from foundation is okay. We're gonna create let's create a final class, pixels client API client. Okay, we're gonna create a session, URL session, and we're gonna have initializer. Initializer is gonna take a config, URL session configuration, and we're gonna say self.session is equal to, and we're gonna construct our URL session based on the configuration that is provided. We're gonna have a convenience in it as well, which is simply going to call self.init with config default. So with the default session, if someone calls this, initializes this one, then we're going to create a default session configuration, and we're going to create URL session using default configuration. Otherwise, they can also provide the session configuration. Okay. Now we're going to create a function that is going to get photos for us. So we're going to create function get photos. Okay. And remember, API client already has implementation for all of its functions. So the only function that it needs is, if you go back, it only needs fetch function. Session is something that we're going to have to initialize, so we are initializing that. Fetch function has a default implementation, so we don't need to worry about providing a default implementation unless you think that you need to override this. Okay. So we're going to create a function get photos, and we're going to get this from photo feed. So we're going to say photo feed type, and type is going to be photo feed. Once again, the reminder for the reminder photo feed is the enum that actually provides us two cases, search by category and curated photos. Okay, so we are expecting that, and we have a completion. Result, photo feed result, and API error. Okay, this guy is going to call fetch function, and we're going to create out of the photo feed, we're going to create a request. So this is where we were talking about how we are tying everything back together inside the endpoint, right? So when you create the endpoint protocol, you create this endpoint has so when you create this endpoint protocol or extend this endpoint protocol, for example, inside your photo feed, right? At that time, you're providing base, path, and query, these three definitions. Your endpoint itself has this URL component and request. Now, URL component uses these base, path, and query to construct the URL itself, right? And this request is the one that actually creates the request for you. So if you call this request, so right here in Pixel's client, we are saying photo feed type, right? Dot request. So it's calling this request. It's collecting all the data, everything that we need for to make this request. So it's collecting the URL with base, path, and query values, and then it's also collecting the auth header. So it's setting the auth header and returning the request itself that we ultimately pass into our API client. Okay. Now we have passed that, right? And we got JSON back for our decoding. So we get the JSON into our decoding, and this is going to be JSON photo feed result type, right? So we're going to simply say guard let photo feed result. So this JSON, yeah, photo feed result, and we're going to cast this JSON and try to cast this JSON into that. Otherwise, we're going to return nil. If the cast is successful, then we're going to return photo feed result. This guy right here, and we're going to call our completion. Okay. All right. So this completion is gonna basically have your photo feed result. Okay. And if there's any error, we're gonna get the error. Okay, so get photos is gonna call the whichever type of feed that we are providing, and that's how you can use your API client. Okay, so once again, all we are doing is passing the getting our feed type and getting the request out of that. We get the JSON and decode it. So we get the decoded JSON, we try to parse it. Okay, we when we parse it, we get the completion. We pass that completion back to the caller of get photos. Okay, so that's how we can use the API client, right? So now we are actually ready to start looking this into or let's put this into a view model, and then we can see how to use this or how to call pixel client.get photos to get the photos out of pixel API. All right, so let's go ahead and create our view model. So we're going to create just one model for list. So I'm just going to right click on the view models folder and select a Swift file, and we're going to call this one photo list view model. Okay, we are going to import from UI kit this time, and we're going to create a final class photo list view model. Okay, now this photo list view model is going to have a photos variable, which is going to contain all the photos. So it's going to be an array of photos. Okay, we also need some way for our view controller to know when photos are loaded. Okay, so we're going to use delegate pattern for that. So we're going to simply create a protocol, and we're going to create it, we're going to name it photo list view model delegate, and the function that's going to be there, the only function is going to be there, is going to be photos loaded. Okay, and we're going to create a weak variable delegate optional. Okay, and excuse me, now we're going to create our client. So pixels client, right? And this pixels client is basically going to download these photos from the API. Okay, let's create another variable called current page. Okay, and during the initialization, or for the initializer of this view model, we are going to initialize our pixel client like so. Okay, and we're also going to call a function called load photos. Now this load photos is going to be an internal function, or actually we're gonna, okay, yeah, let's leave it open for for the view controller to call. So this load photos function is basically going to utilize our pixel client to get the photos. Okay, so let's go ahead and first thing first, because our current page is 0, we're gonna basically increment the current page. So whenever we call this load function, it's gonna increment the page. So we are actually assuming that that user has scrolled to a position, or it's a first time request, so we want to actually increment the page and then make the call to the client. So we send, like, the page number as 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, so we have incremented the current page. Now we're going to create our feed. This is going to be photo feed. We're going to use curated version of photo feed. Current page, we're going to supply the current page value, and per page number of results, we're going to say we want 20. So we want 20 photo results from our API. Then we're going to say take our pixel client object that we have created and call get photos here from feed. Okay, this gives us results. So we're gonna take result, and we're also gonna capture self. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna try to get self. All right, then we're gonna switch on result, and we have two cases. We have success, which gives us the feed, the photo feed result. So photo feed result, yeah, and then we say card let photo result from photo feed result, otherwise return. So you want to make sure that we get photo feed, that photos result. Okay, and then we're gonna call strong self and set photos dot append. So we're gonna append, and we want to append items. So we want to use the overload that takes contents off, because this takes a sequence, and we're gonna say photo result dot photos. All right, and we're gonna say strong self dot delegate dot photo loaded. So we're gonna call our delegate to let our delegate implementer know that hey, we have new photos loaded, so you might want to refresh yourself. Okay, next case, which is the failure case, we're gonna get the error and print the error like that. All right, we should still be able to build, and build should succeed. That means everything is looking good. Okay, so we need so we've got initializer. Now we need a way for our table view, that because this is going to be utilized by table view, our table view needs a photo at index. So what we can do is we can basically give a function that can return the index, and we can create this. We can make this photos as private. So we're going to create two functions. So our table view need two things in order to act as a data source. So basically, table view data source needs count, or number of rows that it needs to be showing, and the cell at index. So we're going to create two functions. One is going to be count, or this can be a variable count, and this is simply going to return photos.count. And there's going to be a function, and this function is going to be get photo at index, and this is going to return a photo. Okay, so what are you going to do here? Simply return photo from that index. All right, so with that, our view model is partially ready. There are a couple of more things that we need to do. Come back and do it here. For example, when we are ready to load images, we're gonna basically create some functions to load images. But let's first test out our API calls to see if they are working or not. Okay, so in the next section, we're gonna basically see how we can take the view controller and make an API call and see if we get any results back. Okay, all right, so first thing we're gonna do is basically check if our view model is returning the right response or not. So let's go ahead and try that out. So I have a home view controller open, and we're gonna create a view model object here. photo list view model. And then we're gonna basically assign the delegate, self-delegate for the view model, and we're gonna say extension home view controller photo list view model delegate. Now we're gonna implement the delegate. There we go. Okay, and whenever our photos are loaded, we're gonna get the uh, get this delegate method called, and we're gonna be able to get the access to the photos. So let's get one photo. So get photo at index 0, and for this we can just print the photographer's name and URL. Let's also print tag. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and run this, and there we go. So we are getting photographer name here, URL, and his tag. So that means our API call is working just fine. That's awesome. So let's now go ahead and I'm going to remove this test code so we know everything is working fine. So let's go ahead and start writing our view controller. Okay, so what we're going to do is instead of having your table view and all the delegates and everything list built out here, we're gonna build them inside another file. So we're gonna call this one um, photo list view. So it's gonna be another class. So we're gonna simply create a Swift file, photo list view. Okay, and inside this photo list view, we're gonna create our table view, and basically the table view is going to host a cell, and our view model and everything is going to be contained here. So let's go ahead and import from UI kit. We're also going to create a protocol so we can propagate the event, for example, selection, photo selection. We want to let our view controller know that photo is selected. So we're going to simply create a protocol for that. So we're going to say photo list item selected delegate, or yeah, or item delegate. Yeah. Okay, and it's going to be class, inheriting class, and then we're gonna create a func selected photo. It's gonna take a photo, so basically it's gonna give us the access to photo. Now we're gonna create our class photo list view, UI view, right? Week var delegate photo list item delegate. Okay, then we're gonna create our view model. So lazy bar view model photo list view model. And we're gonna make this view a delegate for the photo list view model itself. Okay, next thing we need is a table view. we're going to make this class data source and delegate for the table view, and we're also going to register a cell. So let's register UI table cell for now for cell ID. Right now, this is going to complain that these uh, that this class does not conform to these protocols. So let's go ahead and give the conformance. So we can eliminate these errors. So first we're gonna create photo list view photo list item delegate. Okay, and photo list item delegate. It's going to have this function. Okay, and what do we want in this function? Basically, we want to dispatch queue main async, and we're gonna reload the table view, reload data. Okay, next extension UI table. Oh, sorry, photo list view UI table view delegate extension photo list view UI table view data source. Okay, for the number of rows in section, you can simply return viewmodel.photos count. Okay, so count has all the counts, so we're going to return that. And for cell, for row at index path, we're going to create our cell here. So for now, we're going to just return your table view cell, so all the errors can go away. Okay, there is photo list view model delegate. Yeah, photo list view model delegate. That is the delegate that we need. Now this one, and we're gonna stub that one out, and we're gonna do the same thing. Reload data. Okay, so this is going to reload data. This is UI table view delegate. We're going to actually put functions when items are selected, or we need to return the height. So we do actually have a specific height that we want to provide. So we can say height for item, or height for row at index path, and we're going to return 200 here. Okay, so all of our cells are going to be of height 200. All right, so that's going to be that. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to build now, and we should be able to build. Okay, cool. So that's awesome. Now let's go ahead and continue our photo list view. Okay, so we're going to have an initializer, which is going to call super.init for frame 0, and it's going to call a function setup view. All right, setup view is not there, so let's go ahead and create that. And setup view is simply going to add the table view, add subview, table view, and it is also going to call setup constraint. another function that we're going to create. So setup constraints. Okay, here we are going to be laying out our table view without layout. So we're going to simply say ns layout constraints. So you can use anchor based constraints, and we want to constrain our table view on the all sides of the view. So we're going to simply say table view dot leading anchor dot constrain equal to leading anchor, and I'm going to copy that, paste it, and I'm going to use this for trailing anchor as well, for top anchor, and for bottom anchor. Okay, so those are going to be all of our constraints. All right, now now what we need to do is basically set up our cell, because right now we just set up a UI table view cell dot self, and that is all right, but that's not going to display our content. We want to display in a custom cell. So let's go ahead and define a custom cell. So I'm going to create a new file, photo cell. Okay, and this photo cell is basically going to be a class. First of all, we can import from UIKit photo cell. From the UI table view cell, we're going to inherit. We're going to create a function for on reuse. So whenever reuse happens for the cell, we're going to call this function. So it's going to be a closure, which is going to be initialized with empty. Okay, this is basically to get the reuse cell set up. Okay, and we're going to create our image view. Okay, that's going to be our image view, and then we're going to create our photographer level label. This is where we're going to show his name, his or her name. Always remember to set this translate auto sizing mask into constraint to false if you're using programmatic auto layout, because otherwise your auto layout system will run into conflict, because it'll try to create constraints for you and you are also creating constraints. So just remember, this is like the most common error that you can make and easy to miss. You gotta set the text color to white. Okay, and then we need photographer's tag, which is going to be pretty same. We need var here. I'm going to copy this and tag label, photographer tag label. Okay, and it's going to be UI label constraint. Font size is going to be 14 and color is going to be white. Awesome. Okay, so now we can create a blur view, the blur view that's going to sit on the top of the image to show photographer's name and his tag. So we can simply create a private lazy bar blur view. So blur effect view UI visual effect view. We're gonna give it a style dark. Let's create a blur view for this UI visual effect view that takes an effect. An effect is basically blur effect, and this is what we need to return. Before returning this, we need to set translate auto layout to false, otherwise it's gonna cause issues. And we're gonna return blur view. Okay, so that's our blur view. Now we are going to create our initializer for cell, and we're going to call super.init first and supply the style and the use identifier. Okay, and then we're going to call setup view function here as well. So this is going to be another function that's going to set up this view, and can simply leave it like that. Now we need a required initializer, so we're going to simply click this, and that's okay. We can leave it as fatal because we are not initializing anything using storyboard, and this is actually required whenever you are initializing views using storyboard, so we can leave it like that. So if somebody calls it like by mistake, they would know that program is going to crash because it's not implemented. We are not planning to implement it. Okay, now setup, we're going to create another function, setup constraints. Okay, and let's call this function, let's create this function as well. Okay, so for the setup view, we are going to basically set up image view and blur view. So let's put a for each on those, and we're gonna say v in, and we're gonna simply take the content view and add subview v. So it's basically gonna add both of these views into the content view. And then we're gonna do something similar for photographer label and photographer labels tag, and we're gonna say for each, and we're gonna add these on blur effect view. So blur effect view has content view, and we're gonna add a subview view, the view that we are getting right here out of the for each loop. Okay, so that's gonna add our views, and then now we're gonna set up our constraints. So we're gonna say ns layout constraint activate, and let's set up image constraints. So we're gonna have leading anchor for constraints equal to content view dot leading. We want this image to be edge to edge, so for the trailing we're gonna do the same thing, content view dot trailing anchor, and for the top anchor we're gonna have top, and for bottom content views bottom. So we're gonna make the image cover the entire cell. Then blur view, let's add constraints for that. blur effect view leading is going to be constraint equal to content view dot leading anchor. Trailing is going to be constraint to content view dot trailing anchor. And then for the bottom, we're going to say content view dot bottom, and we're going to give this blur view a height constraint. So height anchor constraint equal to constant, and we're going to say we want 50 point of height. Okay. For the photographer label and tag, we're going to have layout constraint we're going to use the overload that takes a constant, so we're going to say blur view dot leading anchor with constant 2, right? And it's going to give us a margin basically for the trailing anchor. We are going to simply say trailing anchor, okay, and constant is going to be -2 because if you give 2, it goes beyond the bounds of the view, okay. And top anchor is going to be the photographer label's top anchor is going to be top anchor for the blur view with constant 2, and for the photographer tag, so let's add tag label. Now let's add tag label, okay. And tag labels leading is going to be the same as blur view leading, okay, with 2. Trailing is going to be similar because we want to anchor it for the leading and trailing the same as the photographer label. The difference is going to be top and bottom. So for the top anchor, you're going to constrain it to photographer label dot bottom. So wherever photographer label ends at the bottom with 2 points of margin, and for the bottom anchor for the photographer tag label is going to be blur views bottom anchor with -2 as the constant. Okay. Now one last thing we need to do in here is prepare for reuse. So prepare for reuse, we want to call super.prepare for reuse first. So let the table view cell do whatever the super class needs to do, and we're going to call on reuse ourselves, and we're going to also set image views image to null. Okay. All right, so this is our cell that is set up now. So in the next section, we're gonna basically set up wire up this cell to our table view, and then start loading the images. So start populating the data. Okay, so cool. All right, so let's continue forward. Basically, what we need is now we have our cell set up. Our photo cell setup. Let's go to our view controller, or basically the photo list view, and inside that view we need to actually set the cell. Okay, so first thing we need to, instead of for the register, instead of registering UI table view cell, we should register our custom cell. So we're going to say photo cell dot self. Okay, that will give it a type to register for the cell. Okay, and next thing we need to do is basically get the row set up. So right here, cell for row at index. path. Okay, so the way we're gonna set up row at index path is going to be, first we're gonna get the cell from reusable cell, so DQ reusable cell. So this ensures the performance of our table view. And what we can do is we can actually create a static variable. Okay, and instead of using this, or we don't need static, actually just create a constant. That way we can actually call it for all the instances. So cell ID here, and we're gonna do the same thing here for cell ID. Okay, and we're gonna pass the index path that we have received right here. All right, now we need to pass this cell as photo cell, because what this DQ reusable cell gives us is a UI table view cell. Okay, now we're going to return a cell, but if the cell is nil, if this casting right here it fails, then we should return something. So you can return UI table view cell. This is going to create just an empty cell. Okay, then next thing we need is a photo. So we're gonna get to the view model and ask it for a photo at index path, and index path at index, and index we're gonna receive from index path dot row. Okay, now from here on we just need to set the photographer label text. So photo dot photographer tag is photographer tag. All right, now these are the label properties, the text properties, but what about the image, right? We have the image URL. So photo has under source, it has landscape and portrait image URL, but those are just strings. We don't want to actually pass strings, but we want to show the photo. Now if we just render the photo like that, that is, I mean, if we download the photo and we display the photo, that's gonna work, but it's not gonna play really well inside the table view cell because of the reusability aspect, and the nature that table view rows can be scrolled up or down. So those images that were being downloaded, they'll download at a later time, right? And you're gonna run into an issue where your table is being reused and then your image actually shows up because it was just downloaded. So in order to overcome all that, what we need to do is basically we need some sort of image loader that can maintain in-memory cache, and basically whenever an image is requested using URL, we check if the image is present in the memory. If it is, we're going to return that. Otherwise, we're going to simply make a call and return the image at a later point. Now, we also need the ability to cancel the image download. That way, we can manage the state property and we properly, and we don't unnecessarily download the image when the cell is not being displayed. Okay, so for all that, we're gonna create an image loader. So I'm gonna right click on networking folder, create a Swift file. We're gonna call this image loader. Okay, and we are going to be importing from UIKit. This is going to be a class image loader. We're going to create two private variables. Well, first one is going to be loaded images. Second one is going to be running requests. So the current requests that are running or that are being performed by the system for image download. Okay, these two variables we're going to use to maintain the state of our image loader. So first one is going to be our cache. Second one is going to be all the running requests that are basically being performed for image download. Then we're going to create a function load image from a URL, and we're going to have a completion block when the image download is done. And for the result, we're going to get UI image in error. Okay, now this is going to return, this closure call is going to return void, and this function call is going to return a UUID. UUID is one value that we're going to use for the cancellation purposes. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to first check for the loaded image. If for the given URL an image is already present, right? If it's already present, then we're going to call the completion with success, and we're going to supply that image that we just found, and we're going to return nil for UUID. Okay, if that is not the case, then we're going to create UUID, and we're going to create a task. Data task with URL we're going to use, and here we're going to receive three things in the completion: our data, response, and error. And we're going to simply process them. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to call differ for running requests and remove value for key UUID, which means that whenever this task gets complete, that means that that image has been downloaded, so that operation is no longer running. So we want to remove that UUID from the running requests. Okay, so if it's already downloaded, that means the image is now in the cache, so we don't need to cancel or anything, because running requests is something that we're going to use to perform the cancellations. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check if let data and let image from data. Okay, if we get those, then we're going to simply call self.loaded images, and we can load or store the image inside loaded image, and call completion with success, and supply image return from here. Okay, next we're gonna check for error. If none, then return. Okay, if we got some error, right, we want to check if we can cast that error as NS error, because we need the code. If the NS error code is equal to you error canceled, so basically we have already canceled, right, then we don't need to do anything. If we have not canceled and there's a failure error that we got, then we want to return that. So we want to let our caller know that something else other than the cancellation happened. Okay, and one more thing we need to do is, first of all, we need to remember to call task.resume, and we need to store the UUID inside our running request, because now that request is running with this line, the request for that particular image download is running, and we want to return UUID as well. Now, how are we going to use this UUID? Well, we're simply going to create a cancel function, and this function is going to take a UUID and it'll simply look for the task and cancel it, okay, if it's found in the running request. Now, one more thing, we need to make sure that we remove value for UUID as well. All right, so this is basically gonna call our image, make sure our image gets downloaded properly and stored, and if there is any running requests whose cell uh, has been reused, then we want to actually cancel those. Now that reuse part, how are we going to handle that? Well, that is going to be part where we're going to configure the cell right here. So what we need to do is we need to set if let URL is equal to, first of all, get the URL from string for photo dot source dot landscape. So we're gonna use landscape version of photo for the image cell, for the photo cell, and then we're gonna get the token first, viewmodel dot loaded. Okay, so if you look at your viewmodel, you can get the photo, right? But there is one more addition we need to do into our viewmodel, which is to download the image, the access to the image, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our viewmodel, photo list viewmodel, and we're going to create an image loader. So instance for image loader. So image loader, like that, and we're going to initialize it right here. Okay, now once we have initialized, we can create a function that will load the image. So we're going to simply call load image function, load image, and we can create that with URL. This is going to return a completion. Now here we're going to call our image loader. So image loader dot load image, and we're going to supply the URL, and we're going to receive a completion with the result. And here we're going to put switch statement on the result itself, because result gives us two values, success and failure. So we're going to say success, let image, and we're going to call completion with image. In case of failure, we're going to print the error and return nil for the completion. Okay, and the token that we get, we're gonna return that token. Okay, there's one more function that we need where we're gonna perform the cancellation. So we're gonna create a cancel function that will take a token of type UUID, and we're gonna say if let token is equal to token, that means there is token is not nil. In that case, call image loader dot cancel token. Okay, so this is basically going to help us download the image from the network and give us the token so we can cancel the image request, and all that code is now wrapped inside the view model. So all we need to do is call the viewmodel to load image for the URL, and we're gonna supply the URL that we just got. And if we get an image, right, we're gonna dispatch queue, go to main thread, and we're gonna simply call cell.image v dot image is equal to image. In case you're wondering what's that image view that appearing whenever we type image v, that is the image view that's by default created for default cell. So which is, that's why we created our property as image v, not to override the other image view. Okay, all right. So that is when our token is assigned, our image is loading. Now, if during this time our cell is reused, right, then if you recall, our photo cell calls this on reuse function, right? Closure call. This is gonna call this closure call, and the closure call is gonna make sure that if there is a token that we have received, then we're gonna, on the view model, we're gonna call cancel for that token to make sure that our cell is ready to be reused. Okay, all right. So with this code, we have our image download ready, and our cells are ready. Okay, so let's go into the home view controller, and inside the home view controller, we are going to create our we are going to add our photo list. So we're simply going to create lazy bar photo list view. Okay, and we're going to initialize that, return view. Now remember to set translate auto sizing mask into constraint is equal to false, and we also want to assign ourselves for this view controller as a delegate for this photo list item delegate, right? So let's create an extension for home view controller photo list item delegate. Okay, now this requires or creates a function selected photo. So whenever the photo is selected, what we need to do is we need to launch a view controller. So launch detail VC here. Okay, so we haven't written that code yet, so we're gonna write it when we have that selection operation ready. We don't have it right now, so we should be okay. Okay, I mean, we're not gonna do it right now, but we're gonna come back and do it in a bit. Let's call setup view function and create setup function. Okay, this is gonna basically add subview for our photo list, and we're gonna call setup constraints. Okay, here we're simply gonna set up the layout constraint. So activate, and for the photo list, we're simply gonna add it to constrain it to all sides. So constraint equals to view dot leading anchor. Okay, I'm gonna paste it 4 times. I'm gonna put trailing anchor here. Top anchor and bottom anchor, like so. Okay, so with that, our table view is ready. Let's go ahead and try to launch it and see what we got. And there we go. As you can see, our images are loading, and landscape views of landscape part of the image are loading. And if you notice, our images are loaded when the cell itself loads. So it's not loading or basically creating that effect of like showing another image till the time one of the images being downloaded. So it's loading the correct image into the cell itself. Okay. All right. So our image load part is done. Now let's go ahead and set up our detail basically. So we can tap on the cell and we're going to use delegate pattern for this. So basically what's going to happen is your list view is going to have basically cell selection, and it's going to propagate that event using delegate protocol or delegation pattern, and then our view controller is going to receive uh, that call, that delegate call, and it's going to basically propagate that to launch the view controller, detailed view controller. Okay, so in the next section, that's what we're going to look. All right, so let's go to our photo list view. So we are already here, photo list view, right? And in the photo list view, if you scroll down to where our view delegate, right, table view delegate is, okay, what we need to do is we need to have ability for user to select rows, right? So we're gonna say did select row at index path, and whenever user selects a row, we're gonna get the photo for that index path. So we're gonna say get photo at index path dot row. All right, and we're gonna call the delegate for selected photo like that. Okay, so we're gonna simply propagate that to selected row via delegate and supply the photo. Now that photo is going to be received by the view controller that's implementing, or the view that's, or the class that's implementing this delegate, which is this view controller right here. So that's actually how you're going to propagate this select event to your view controller. Okay, now here we need to create basically a view controller so we can launch that. All right, so I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to create detail view controller, import UI kit, detail view controller, which is going to inherit from UI view controller. Okay, now this UI view controller is going to need view did load, so we're going to call super.view did load. All right, and let's set the view dot background color to be white as well. Okay, because when your view controller is created programmatically, it doesn't have any color, so it's by default it's just a empty color, like clear color basically. Now this view controller is going to need a photo, so we're going to create a property called photo. Okay, and then we're going to need a an image view where we're going to display the image. So image view, UI image view. Okay, and don't forget to translate auto layout, translate auto sizing mask into constraint to false, and then v dot content mode is going to be scaled aspect fill. Okay, we're also going to need a close button, so although user can dismiss by swiping down, it's better to provide a close button if in case something else happens. It's a good practice actually to provide a way out from your view even though there is a gesture that exists. So we're going to create a UI button for that. We're gonna set title for the button with X, and the state is gonna be normal. Set title color to be white for normal state, and we also gonna add target of self with a selector. Now selector is an Objective-C function, so we're gonna decorate with Obj-C func. So yeah, add Obj-C, right? And this is basically simply going to be a function that can be called using the selector. So we're gonna say did tap close button, and we're gonna dismiss animated true, completion nil, and we're gonna call this did tap close button for event touch up inside. Okay, and we're gonna return our view, which is going to be close button. Okay, now next thing we need to do is we need to add these two. So we're going to say v dot add subview image view and view dot add subview close button. Okay, and then we're going to create our layout. So ns layout constraint dot activate, and here we're going to first constrain our close button. So trailing anchor dot constrain view dot trailing anchor, and we're gonna constrain it from -16 point from the trailing side. Close button dot top anchor is going to be constrained to view dot top anchor with 16 points. So we have like, if this was our view, we have reached here, almost here. So we're gonna define close buttons dimensions for width and height. So close button dot width anchor dot constraint equal to constant, and we're gonna say it's gonna be 40 points, and close button dot height anchor dot constraint equal to constant 40. Okay, so that's our close button. Now our image view is going to be image view dot leading constraint equal to, and we're going to constrain this to all sides of the view. So we're simply going to say view dot leading. We don't need this, so we can remove that, and I'm going to copy and paste this 3 more times. One for trailing, top anchor, bottom anchor, like so. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to basically, when we receive the image, we want to download the image, right? So we're going to say if let URL. So if we can construct the URL from string, and string we get from photo.source.portrait. Now this time we're going to use portrait portrait version of photo. Okay, and we're going to say we don't care about the cancellation, because when we are loading this image, this view is going to be launched, right? So it's going to start the image loading. So we're going to simply say image loader dot load image for URL, and for the completion we're going to simply say result in switch result, when we get the result, and we're going to simply say success, let image, so we get the image here, and we're gonna go, once again, the image always downloads whenever, like, URL session is called, it's called on a different thread. So you want to make sure whenever you are updating your UI that you are going back to the main thread before you update your UI. So that's what we are doing here. We are going to dispatch queue.main.async, so we can go to the main queue, and then we can set the image for our image view. If in case any error, we're going to print the error. And that should do it. Okay, so that should basically download our image, set our image, and set our view controller. Now we go back to our home view controller. That's where we are actually gonna launch this. So like selected photo, whenever this is called, we're gonna set the view controller or create the object for detailed view controller. We're gonna set the photo to the photo that's being supplied to us by the delegate right here, and then we're gonna simply call present, and we're gonna present view controller animated true with the completion as nil. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to launch it, and as you can see, our selection is working and our close button is working. If you notice, the dismiss, swipe to dismiss is also working, and we are loading an image, a portrait version of the image for the view, right? Okay, now onto the part where we want to display, keep displaying, basically keep the infinite scroll. That concept is that piece of code is very simple. So if you notice right now, if you go reach to the end, there's no more images. So right, images end here, but if we want to have, like, load more image as the user is scrolling down, that piece of functionality we need to add. So that is a simple technique. Basically, we need to implement a delegate call for will display cell. So will display, so cell is called cell will, right, let's call display, and we'll see. Okay, will display cell right there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we want to check if the index path dot row, right, if it has reached viewmodel dot count minus 10. So basically whatever the view model count is, if it has reached 10 minus of that, so like, we only have 10 more images left to display for the user, right, then we want to call the view model dot load photos again. Now view model dot load photos, what it's going to do is basically going to increment the current page count, page number, right, and it's going to call our photo feed with that page number. So if the page number was 1, it's going to increment and make the page number 2 and get 20 more images from the API, and then we're gonna basically load those images, populate our view model, and as the user is scrolling, our images are gonna load. So let's go ahead and try this out if it is working. So if you notice, we are scrolling, and there we go, we have more images loaded, and keep scrolling, and we have more images loading, and if we keep going down, it's gonna basically load more and more images. Okay, so that is how easy it is to basically create infinite loading for your table view. Okay, All right, so with that, we have reached to the end of this series. So hope you enjoyed and you learned why. And basically learned how to create an app that is completely created programmatically with the best ways to basically separate out your features. So now you have like a photo list view, and your home view controller, if you look at like it has just few things. Now for the challenge, you have two challenges. Basically, first challenge is to create a view model and simplify this view controller as well. So uh, see if you can basically extract out all this UI related code from this detail view controller and put it in a separate view, just like we did for the home view controller. We separated out inside a photo list view. So try to do that. That's the first challenge. Second challenge is, if you remember, in our endpoint, we had two endpoints. We had a curated list, and we had a search list, right, for the enumeration. And I guess it was the endpoint. Was it the endpoint? Uh, Maybe Pixel Client had that. Photo feed. Okay, models. Inside the models, we have photo feed. Okay, yeah, photo feed had search by category and curated. Now we have used curated version to load display our image. Now your challenge is to basically create a segmented control here, and inside this segmented control, you'd have two segments, one for curated, one for search by category. And curated is going to be automatically selected. Search by categories, when you tap, you can type a category or just choose a category if you want to hard code it, and then basically let your user explore images based on that category. Okay, so those are basically the challenges that you have to um, take for yourself. uh, Implementation is going to be similar to this, so hopefully it's going to go smooth. Okay, all right, so thanks again for watching. I really appreciate everything, and I really appreciate you guys support. All right, see you later.